Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I just found out that Shaquille O'Neal has joined the group of people who are athletes or former athletes who are claiming that they believe the world is flat. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And this gets scary, and this kind of goes to show a point I try to make to people oftentimes, that athletes are oftentimes not the most intelligent people. Some of them are, some of them aren't. I don't want to stereotype there, because there are also top athletes who've gone on to become medical doctors, researchers, everything else. They exist. And some of them are very, very intelligent. But a lot of them seem to have no ability outside of their athletic ability, something that they chose to do because they had an innate talent for it and a passion for it, and they were good at it. But it also shows that many of these people really have no critical thinking skills and no intelligence in any area outside of their area of talent, and we need to be very, very careful about listening to their opinions about anything. That their ability as an athlete has no direct bearing upon their view of anything else in the world. And in many cases, it's the exact opposite, because they focus all of their efforts, and some of them aren't smart, and they focus all of their efforts into that one field, that they're actually oftentimes below average in other areas. And because they're a famous athlete doesn't mean that we should actually listen to what they say. And it was interesting because Shaquille O'Neal said things like, well, schools don't teach stuff very well. Maybe they're just teaching us a bunch of nonsense. Well, clearly he didn't learn very much in school. And that's the scary part. Maybe he was just taught a bunch of nonsense, and maybe that's what happens with athletes who don't seem to be very smart, who have an athletic potential. Maybe the teachers just kind of pass them and help them along, and that does happen a lot. And that could very well be the case here, because he's saying, well, when I drive across the country and I drive or whatever, coast to coast, it seems to be a straight line to me, not a curve. And the absurdity of that, and they'll say things like there's no proof that, the earth is flat. But they don't understand basic things like gravity. They're under the assumption that we can't look at the sky and measure it ourselves and realize that the earth is spinning, and is a sphere spinning through the universe. And anyone who studies the stars for a couple of months can look at that and measure that and see that's the case. But they're working on this assumption that everything else in the sky up there must be different from the earth. All these things up there are spheres that are spinning everything we see through a telescope, or with our eye up there is a sphere that's spinning. All right, all of them. That we're different, that maybe we're the center of the universe doing that, but then they don't think about basic things like gravity. Think about gravity for a moment here. And it's ironic that what I'm doing here, I'm making ammunition. This is important, because if we were on a big flat object, a big flat disk or something, and not a sphere that has a centralized point of gravity that's even across the planet, if we were on a sphere, if I were to make bullets, let's say it's a 6,000 mile wide sphere, bigger than the Earth, 6,000 miles, bigger than the known Earth. And that we started at a point, because gravity is going to be dispersed the further you get away from the center of that disk, right? Gravity's going to get less, mass is going to decrease. Well, mass is going to stay the same, but the weight of objects is going to decrease. Well, I tune ammo as a hand loader. The weight of these bullets versus pressure in there is very, very, very important, so that I don't blow my fucking face off when I pull the trigger. So if I were to make a bullet 1,000 miles further away from the center, and I got within 5% or 10% of my safety margin, 10% of my safety margin, which is pretty reasonable, and then I traveled 1,000 miles closer to the center, and I were to put one of these in a gun and pull the trigger, it would blow my fucking hands off. The gun would probably explode. The barrel would explode. The chamber would explode. How about all you people who drive cars? People who drive cars, that's going to be a big chunk of you. If your car was tuned and calibrated, and piston weights and everything was set up to be over a couple thousand miles away from the center, and you were to drive to the center of the earth, your engine would start having major problems. The center of this big disk we're on. This little just basic physics stuff. Basic physics stuff. Show that this idea is complete nonsense, no matter what they're trying to teach you in school. Anyone who understands physics, or who messes with any sort of object or machinery, or plays a sport or lifts weights, should know that. If you were to travel 1,000 miles in a different direction, and you're at a different point on the disk, radius of the disk, because you come closer to the center or further out, You would be able to jump higher or not be able to jump as high. You wouldn't be able to run as fast, or you would run faster depending on where you're at. And it wouldn't just be a little bit, it would be very, very noticeable. Like if you traveled 1,000 miles, your vertical leap could change by as much as 2 feet. Again, basic physics. But here's the thing, people got to watch this. When you listen to athletes, and this can carry over to people in other areas, people are like, well, okay, well, all they know about is sports, but do they? Oftentimes, athletes provide nothing more than the genetic gifts. They provide genetic gifts for their sport. They don't train themselves. Stop and think about that. If you wanted to become a lot better at basketball, become better at basketball or football, would you listen to Kyrie Irving or Shaquille O'Neal? Did they train themselves to be pros? Most of them had 3 or 4 different coaches at any given time. They have probably 1 or 2 strength and conditioning coaches, some sort of agility coach, a dietitian. Would you listen to them? They couldn't even train themselves. What makes you think that someone who can't train themselves to be a champion can train you? You would probably be better off going and listening to their coaches. And some of their coaches have possibly never played a basketball game in their life. But they're the ones who coach to them to be better at it because they have the actual knowledge. The athlete provided the genetic material in the body and the talent. Their trainers, their athletic trainers, and their coaches have the actual knowledge to turn them into a champion, to make them stronger, faster, jump higher, be more agile. Wouldn't you be better off listening to their coaches? Why would you listen to them? It's the same with people in the training world oftentimes. You see all these people who they see someone who's a genetically gifted lifter or bodybuilder who just happens to use some really good drugs, and they picked the right parents. And people want to listen to their training advice because they've achieved a certain look. But 80% of their look is from drugs and genetics. It's not even from how they train. And oftentimes their look even comes purely from, can they restrict their food intake long enough? Can they control their appetite? Well, here's the kicker. People can argue about diet with that. Oh, there you go. There's part of the secret. But really, tons of guys I've met who compete in these aesthetic endeavors use drugs that decrease their appetite. Some of those drugs are very dangerous, and that's the problem. But there are a lot of drugs out there that can reduce appetite. There are drugs that increase appetite. A lot of them use drugs just to control their appetite, not necessarily the best diet in the world. They combine that with diet. So sometimes even their knowledge of dieting to get really lean isn't always effective. They just do a lot of work. They take a drug to help them recover, a drug to help them burn fat, and a drug to suppress their appetite. Shouldn't you be talking to their chemist? Think about this. There's other people who are more knowledgeable who are feeding them information or drugs or something else oftentimes. There are other people out there that contributed. Maybe their knowledge isn't that good. So people need to step back and think about that. Just because someone is successful in one of these endeavors, some athletic endeavor of any type or physical endeavor, it generally means they had good genetics for it, they had passion for it, and they had drive for it. It doesn't mean they're even knowledgeable about their own area of expertise. There are probably people helping them who have more knowledge than they do at some point along the way, and sometimes for the entirety of their career. Don't assume that just because they're good at their endeavor that they know about that. So here's the reality. People listen to various stars talk about things that they actually have no knowledge of, no understanding of, and we have no reason to believe these people are even average intelligence or higher sometimes. And yet they speak as voices of authority and people listen. When the truth is, maybe they don't actually know anything. Maybe they're dumb as a box of rocks. Because I'm going to honestly say, after listening to both Shaquille O'Neal and Kyrie Irving talk about the flat earth, these guys are fucking stupid. And I would be very, very careful about listening to anything they say. When they have this level of critical thinking and this level of intellect, anything that comes out of their mouth, even including how to get better at basketball, potentially becomes suspect. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.